Hello everyone and welcome to today's episode of Como Live, brought to you by the Legacy Amendment. My name is Ann and I'm here today to talk to you all about biofacts. As a reminder, if you have any questions during my talk, please feel free to put them in the comment section and we will do our best to get to them. So biofacts, what is a biofact, you may be asking? So biofact is just kind of short for a biological artifact. And so basically an artifact is usually something discovered that was man-made, biological meaning from life. So in this case, it tends to be things from nature that we can learn from. And so we're going to talk about kind of the main biofacts that people usually think about. I would like to tell you a little bit about where biofacts come from and how we use them here. And I'm also going to do a couple little fun quizzes for you today. So let's get started. Usually when we talk about biofacts, the first thing people think of are bones, and in particular skulls. And we do have a very robust collection of skulls here at Como Zoo and Conservatory. And I have 4 of them here for you today. 1, 2, 3, 4. And these are actually going to be my first quiz for you today. So I have 4 different skulls. And I'm going to go ahead and we're going to just film them maybe for like 10 seconds. And I want you to go ahead and in the comments section, go ahead and answer which skulls you think these animals belong to. And I will give you a hint, and that all 4 of these animals, we do have living examples of them at Como Zoo. And so go ahead and take, we'll say 10 seconds to answer 1, 2, 3, 4, which animals you think these skulls belong to. Just a couple more seconds here. All right, hopefully we got some good answers there. So we'll start with skull number 1 down here. So skull number 1, if you answer that this is a giraffe, you are correct. We can tell it's a giraffe because of the ossicones. So both the bony protuberances up here as well as his bony protuberance here on his forehead. Lots of times people will see the skull and think it's a dinosaur skull, and I don't disagree. It is one of our largest skulls here at Como, though not our largest one. But this is a giraffe skull. Skull number 2, if you guessed that this was a polar bear, you are correct. So this is a polar bear, and one of the ways that I can tell that it's a polar bear compared to, say, other large predators is the thing I notice most is the size of the nose here. Polar bears have really large noses, and that's to help them warm the air before it enters their lungs. And so you can see it reflected in their skull shape, the size of their nose. Skull number 3, if you guessed that this belongs to a zebra, you were correct. So this is a zebra skull. The things that make me realize that this is a zebra skull is eyes set to the side. It looks very horse-like, of course. The long snout, teeth just in the front, but teeth missing here on this bar, just like a horse. That's what tells me that that is a zebra skull. And then our final skull, I think this one might be our most tricky one. If you guessed that this was a harbor seal, you are correct. And this one, I'm not even going to say that I would be like confident seeing this skull and saying, oh, for sure a harbor skull. It looks like a small predator to me, definitely. You can tell by the teeth, as well as the eyes are kind of facing forward. But I don't think I would necessarily even be confident that that I could say, yep, harbor seal, just by looking at that skull. And so one of the reasons we have biofacts is because we can continue to learn from an animal even after they have died. And so sometimes people like to know, are these real skulls? And some of them are, and some of them aren't. And so for example, our real skulls up here today are our giraffe and our zebra. They are from formerly living giraffes and zebras. But our 2 fake skulls or cast skulls are the polar bear and the harbor seal. And one of the easiest ways to tell whether or not a skull is real or not is by looking in the nostrils. If the nostrils do not go all the way into the skull, if it just kind of ends flat, then you know that that's not a real skull. Sometimes also it has a nice little like tag. This says it's a bone clone, and so you can tell, okay, this is not from an actual harbor seal. It's a cast or a replica from a harbor seal skull. And so we like to use these skulls to help educate people on the animals that they're seeing here at the zoo. And so it's really interesting to think about, like, oh, I can see the ossicones, the big hairy protuberances on a giraffe, but it's another thing to realize that those are actually made of bone. And that's why a male giraffe can use it to hit another male giraffe when they're fighting over breeding rights and not really hurt themselves because, well, they can hurt the other giraffe, but not themselves because they are made out of bone. Or you might be talking about adaptations in the tundra and realize that's why polar bears have such large noses, is to help warm up that air. Or the fact that prey animals tend to have eyes on the sides of their heads so they can see around themselves more to watch for predators, whereas predators tend to have more forward-facing eyes because they really need good depth perception, especially if they're pouncing or leaping when they're hunting other animals. People also often like to know, well, where did you get these biofacts? Because of course, when we're talking about real skulls, they formerly belonged to a living animal. We often get our biofacts from animals that died at zoos. Not usually from our zoo, because of course there's an emotional attachment to our animals. We love them. And of course, everything and everyone eventually dies. But our animals are ambassadors, and if we can continue to learn from those animals after death, then they can continue to serve a purpose, even if it's just their skull or another bone. And so while this giraffe and zebra did not come from Como Zoo, they did come from other zoos. And sometimes when an animal passes away here at Como, we will submit to have the skull removed or the pelt removed so we can continue to learn from that animal. It's kind of sad to think about, but it really does help the animal's legacy live on and continue to help educate people just like they did in life. Usually we think mostly of skulls when we think of bones, but of course other parts of animals can be really interesting to learn from too. So for example, you can see the difference between a reindeer antler and a gazelle horn. An antler is something that is shed every year. We have so many reindeer antlers here at Como because we get 2 from each of our reindeer every year. And so we have a plethora of reindeer antlers, but you can see kind of the difference between that and a gazelle horn, which is permanent. They grow that and they live with that the rest of their lives, and so you can see like the bone inside the gazelle horn. You can also learn from, for example, teeth. This is a walrus tusk, and so when you're able to touch it and feel it, you can see how heavy it is and how large it is. In comparison to this item, which when I have people guess what this is, everyone always guesses a narwhal horn, or tooth, or tusk, whatever you'd like to call it. And to be completely honest, this item was not tagged, and so for a long time we agreed. We're like, yep, that's clearly what that is a narwhal horn. But if you look at a narwhal tusk or horn, they're actually spiral, and they're made out of tooth material. And when people were looking at this looks almost like it's made of wood. It's sandpapery in texture. And so then we realized, after we'd been telling people incorrectly for a while, this is actually the beak of a swordfish, or a swordfish bill. And so it's really interesting to be able to touch that and see how it feels. And it's still really heavy, but you can see that it's hollow on the inside. And so it's interesting to be able to kind of compare different structures from different types of animals. Besides skulls, the next thing that people most often think of when they think of biofacts is pelts and furs. And so that's going to bring us to our next quiz here. So I have 3 small pelts here, A, B, and C. And I'm going to go ahead and give you some time to guess which animals you think these pelts come from. And I will give you another hint, just like I did the last time. All 3 of these animals live in Minnesota. So they're all native to Minnesota. So we have pelt A, pelt B, and pelt C. I will give you another 10 seconds. If you wanted to make a guess in the comments about which animals these belong to, you can go ahead and do that. Just a couple more seconds if you've got any guesses. Okay, we'll go ahead and get our answers here. For pelt A, if you guess that this pelt belonged to a raccoon, you are correct. And on these pelts, I kind of hid some of their most defining characteristics. Like, for example, if you had seen the raccoon tail, I think it would have been a really easy guess for most people. So that's usually how I can tell it's a raccoon is by the tail. For pelt B, if you guessed that this was a beaver, you are correct. The nice rich brown color indicates that it's a beaver. It's really thick and heavy duty, great for shedding water and keeping warm. And pelt C, if you guessed that this was a badger, you are correct there as well. They have a short little tail and they have this kind of like salt and peppery looking fur. And so all three of these are animals that are from the state of Minnesota. Pelts are a really great educational tool at zoos because it allows you to touch animals that you might never ever get an opportunity to experience how they feel. So besides that, I can tell that the raccoon is a little bit coarser than the beaver, and the badger is, I think, is the softest one of them all. We have some larger pelts as well. We have on this table here the pelt of a polar bear and the pelt of a lion. And these are probably two of our most precious pelts here at Como Zoo because obviously polar bears are an endangered species. And so to have the entire pelt of a polar bear is something that's really special. And so it's really great when people get an opportunity to see what a polar bear feels like and understand that, oh, their fur isn't white, it's yellow. And that's because it reflects the sun and helps keep them warm in the Arctic. And our lion pelt here, it allows you to have the opportunity to see the difference between the mane fur as well as just the normal body fur and feel that that feels a little more coarse and how long it is, and that's a little softer as well. And so it allows you to touch animals that even like our zookeepers rarely get to touch. When you're dealing with dangerous animals like a polar bear or a lion, you almost never get an opportunity to touch them unless they're underneath like a veterinary procedure and they are anesthetized. And so it's a really great learning opportunity to be able to touch those things. Because pelts, for the most part, are real, they have come from a formerly living animal, it's really important that we treat not only our pelts but all of our biofacts with extreme amounts of respect, because these were animals that were born, they lived, they had desires, and they met needs, and then they died. But we still want to make sure that we're treating them with the respect that they deserved in their life as well, because they're continuing to educate us. And so sometimes I'll have people, when they see like the raccoon fur, they're like, oh, I would love to have a fur coat out of this, or those types of things. Or I've had kids like want to wear a pelt like a cape and like run around, which is like, I understand the excitement and like how cool it is to feel and touch these things, but that's not in the spirit of why this animal continues to educate us. And so we make sure it's really important that we're always treating our biofacts with the extreme amount of respect that they deserve. Sometimes it's really difficult to get a pelt from an animal, but you'd still like to learn from it. And so there are, just like there are cast skulls or bone clones, there are some things called kind fur, which are replicas of fur. And so this here is ocelot, and this here is snow leopard. So it gives people an opportunity to touch and see what the fur looks like from an animal that is really actually very difficult to maybe get a pelt from because they're extremely rare or endangered. And so you can say, well, we don't have a snow leopard pelt, but you can touch this kind fur. It's not real, but it's a replica, and it feels very similar to what it would if we had an actual pelt. And it's a more humane way to be able to have those things to educate people about as well. So our main two biofacts that most people think of are skulls and bones and then pelts. But there's a whole plethora of other types of biofacts, and I have kind of a third miscellaneous table that kind of covers just a small amount of those biofacts. And so we'll turn to that table here. And so I have kind of a collection here. The first things I have here is a full mount, and so taxidermy is a tool that can definitely allow us to continue to learn about an animal. Yes, you could look at a fox skull, and yes, you could feel a fox pelt, but when you have a fully mounted fox, it allows you to see other features such as how the skull fits into the pelt, or how the eyes are looking forward, or how the tail looks on it instead of just being flat or floppy. And so that can really be a really beneficial tool to help us learn about an animal as close as it could have been in life, but while deceased. We also sometimes, besides having individual bones, have full skeletal mounts as well. And so this is a turtle, and I like to use this skeleton a lot because it helps me explain to people that turtles and tortoises are not in their shells. Turtles and tortoises are their shells. And so when you're looking at this skeleton of this turtle, the bottom shell has been removed, and you can see that his spine and his ribs are part of his shell. They are not within his shell. They are fused and a part of his shell. And so that allows kind of really have this kind of aha moment, especially when you're talking to children, that when I pet a turtle's shell, they absolutely can feel that, because it's not something that they're carrying on their back. It is their back. It's part of their skeletal system. And so it's a really good teaching tool to be able to see an entire skeleton. Just like pelts, you can, of course, preserve feathers as well. And so feathers can always be a really great tool. We have a peacock tail here, which is, of course, beautiful to view. And you can see the different colors and as well as the different types of feathers. And then right here, we also have a hawk wing. And so that can be a really good tool to help people understand the difference of the different types of feathers, as well as what different types of feathers, primary feathers and secondary feathers and downy feathers and flight feathers, all the different feathers that birds have that help them do different things such as fly or hover or dive or swim or stay warm. It allows you to demonstrate camouflage. And I really like it when I have like a hawk wing compared to like an owl wing. Owls have specialized feathers that allow them to fly silently. And so it's really fun when you like have a child and you wave one wing at them and then another one, they can hear the hawk wing flapping and they can't hear the owl wing because that's their specialized feathers. Besides having an entirely mounted taxidermy animal, sometimes you just have parts of an animal. And so this is a hawk foot, and it's really useful when you're talking about adaptations for predators. You can talk about the talons and how strong and sharp they are. And so having just the foot allows you to bring it easily to other places instead of carrying around an entire hawk mount. So it's small and easy to bring around, but you can still take the opportunity to touch these feathers on their feet, which look like fur and feel like fur, but they are feathers, as well as feel the sharp talons, or even look at kind of the scaling on the bottom of their foot, which you wouldn't normally get to see with a hawk. It's like, oh yeah, it's got those little scales. It's because birds came from dinosaurs, and so they have scaling as well. You can also have special things like an ostrich egg here. And so this is really fun to be able to show people, like, we have ostriches here. This is from one of our ostriches here at Como Zoo, most likely Olive. She tends to be the better egg layer. And so as they lay eggs, we get an opportunity to add them to our Biofact collection. And so it allows people to see how large and hard ostrich eggs are. And of course, we talk mostly about animals here at Como Zoo, but of course we would be remiss to completely ignore plants, not only because of our gorgeous conservatory, but also because you can't have animals without plants, and everything is interconnected. And so it's really important to always include plants, and so we have some really great plant biofacts as well. So I have two of them here today. This is the branch from an acacia tree, and so I usually bring this one out when I have the giraffe skull out at the same time, and I talk about how a giraffe has an 18-inch tongue, and it's really specialized to be able to go in and remove leaves from the acacia tree, which is covered in thorns. And then you show them the branch from the acacia tree, and you can see how long and sharp these thorns are, and you can even feel them. And it becomes so much more impressive to actually have the idea that, wow, this giraffe puts his tongue in here and pulls these leaves off without getting poked because he has such a skillful long tongue. And I also like to usually, lots of times a biofact I like to bring is, this is a cocoa pod from the cacao tree. We do grow them in the North Garden. And so I really like to talk to people about where chocolate comes from, which is from a tree. It's from a plant. They grow inside a pod. And you can talk about the whole process of how you take the beans out and you dry them and then ferment them and grind them up. But I love to share the pod because you can hear the beans inside, and then when we're not messed up, you can smell it and see that it does smell like chocolate. And so it's such an interesting connection to make, that something I really like to eat, chocolate, comes from a plant. And you might not get that opportunity if you don't have an opportunity to experience biofacts through all of your senses: sight, sound, touch. We're not going to taste anything probably, but most of your senses. It's important to know that when we have biofact collections like this, we treat them just like a museum. We have museum quality cabinets where we store all of our skulls and pelts and bones. The pelts are double warded because, of course, they're extra susceptible to mold and bug infestation, and we want to make sure we're caring for them so they last as long as we can. Every time you touch a pelt, hand oils slowly degrade it, and so you have to balance out the educational use of a pelt compared to caring for it, but that's why we keep them in extra bins inside a museum quality cabinet as well. Every single one of our biofacts is given an ID number, which is stored in a database so we understand what it is and where it came from. If we ever need to send a biofact elsewhere, we record that. Sometimes a biofact gets broken, or through wear and tear, it finally is no longer suitable to be used, and so we have to follow rules and regulations in order to not use that biofact anymore. We can't just like throw them away. And then it's also really important that some of these belong to endangered animals or are protected. We have like a whale rib bone, which is amazing, but polar bears are extremely endangered, and so it's important that we're following all of our local laws and regulations. In some states, for example, you can't just pick up a hawk feather or an owl feather because it may be against the law. And so we need to make sure that when we have biofacts, we're following all of our local laws and regulations in regards to care and storage as well. Do we have any questions at all? All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining me about this talk about biofacts. I think it's something that's really interesting, and it's something that's easy to forget that it's such an important part about learning and discovery at zoos and conservatories and aquariums and even nature centers and museums. And we can learn so much more about animals when we're able to see them in different ways. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.